These are what Red Book means by its young adults. People in a certain living situation with particular interests and particular goals.
The whole expectation of living the American dream. An expectation that, in practice, we are simply unable to meet nowadays. What is so bad about going to work is not just having to work so many hours or not having time to enjoy our families and friends. It's that we can't enjoy life anymore. Not even to the minimum degree. We can't consume as much as we used to. Our purchasing power is vastly different from what it was 20 years ago. Yet, it's not just about consumerism. It's that we live in a more inhuman society. Colder, more indifferent, more superficial. A society that feels so strange to belong to that we just have to get used to carrying an uneasy feeling in the back of our minds all the time. Many try to find solace online, attempting to escape the contradictions of everyday life. In doing so, they grow distant from their families and friends, and start only identifying with the feelings of strangers on a screen. And while there can be some benefit to finding solace online, isolating yourself is simply unhealthy. Yet, this only gives us a hint at the answer to why we're so obsessed with the Backrooms. Recently I came across an interesting proposal for a revival of the Backrooms trend. It's what you could call the historical Backrooms, vast labyrinthine environments that evoke historical places. In a way, these places can seem luxurious, precisely because they remind us of an old castle, or a historic mansion, belonging to the rich and powerful. And that's the word I wanted to focus on: luxury.
It is my house, by the way. I'm the one paying for it.
Because we can think of ourselves as products of our environments, and most of the time this can help us understand what could make our lives better. If we're being honest with ourselves though, we know that human beings are much more complicated than that. There is something within us that wants to consume more, acquire more, own bigger houses and possess greater purchasing power. Always bigger and bigger and bigger, until it can no longer be truly measured and can only be dreamed of. But such a desire, of course, cannot come for free. The places we desire are too large for our individual use. They can also feel deeply lonely and isolating, as if I'm constantly waiting for something to appear at the edge of my vision, something or someone hidden, constantly watching me. In most Backrooms games and movies, monsters appear primarily to create tension, to add a sense of adventure to the whole experience. In this movie, the monsters are distorted reflections of the self, just as the Backrooms themselves are distorted reflections of real places. You could say that in much of Backrooms content, these monsters are, in a way, guardians of these gigantic luxurious spaces. And if I were to guess my point about why we are so fascinated with the Backrooms, it's that they are about appropriation. Our unconscious need to appropriate places for ourselves, even if those places only loosely resemble real ones. It doesn't matter if it's a weird, nonsensical place. It's cool. It's big. I like it, and I want it all for myself. Not just to explore it, to own it.
Because this is my house. I pay for it.
There's a genre of YouTube content called urban exploration, which consists of exactly that. People, often teenagers and young adults, entering abandoned or obscure properties out of curiosity. The similarities between many of these videos and the Backrooms are noticeable. But if we reduce the motivation of these content creators to mere curiosity, we would be doing them a disservice. If you did this kind of thing when you were a kid or a teenager, you know that deep down there was something more going on. Many times we were actually searching for a place to hang out, a place that could belong only to us. In a way, we wanted an entire property for ourselves, a place our group of friends could appropriate. We felt disconnected from our ordinary urban world. In the liminal space between adolescence and adulthood, we were constantly disappointed by how stale adult life seemed, how boring it was, how flavorless. there simply wasn't enough adventure for our highly energetic teenage bodies, and it makes perfect sense that Ken Parsons was inspired to make his background films when he was a teenager. But of course, reducing the Backrooms to a teenage fantasy is also very limiting. What is so interesting to recognize that adolescence, as annoying as it can seem to adults, is also a period of almost endless creativity, unconstrained by the same social norms and expectations of conformity demanded by adult life. It is a period when you can observe adults from a distant and detached perspective. The way adults are expected to constantly follow rules can seem nonsensical and limiting, and well, we have to admit that sometimes teenagers are right about that. The bureaucratic structures underlying social life can feel deeply frustrating to anyone at any age. And I know it might sound strange to associate Beckham's exploration with luxury. After all, who would want to appropriate a place like that? A completely distorted, senseless place. It's precisely because the obsession with the Backrooms comes from an overwhelming sense of not belonging in the real world. The desire to explore it is simply a reflection of the alienation we feel every single day. Close to the climax of the full-length Backrooms movie, there is the infamous dinner table scene. The point of the scene can easily be missed by most viewers. It lacks the most recognizable aspects associated with the Backrooms lore. There is no monster pursuit, no labyrinthine exploration, and no found footage cinematography. And don't get me wrong, the sequence that comes right after it, with the pirate doll pursuing the doctor, is the coolest part of the whole movie. It's what we had all been waiting for, and it really delivers. Yet, this scene is where all of the movie's ideas begin to come together.
I pay for everything. I pay for you to go to school.
Clark is a deeply egotistical person.
I'm gonna come back here with proof, and you're gonna owe me a serious fucking apology.
He has already lost any meaningful human connection and sees other people as nothing more than means to his own ends. For someone who felt alienated from his place in life, he initially saw the Backrooms as nothing more than an adventure, a distraction from his boring and fulfilling life. He was becoming the kind of explorer he had unconsciously wanted to become, like a pirate, a free spirit, or a prehistoric man, at least an idealized version of one. And while Clark sees the Backrooms as a new place where he might finally belong, Dr. Mary is the complete opposite. She is still completely attached to her nostalgic memories, to the house where she belonged as a child, even though she had a traumatic upbringing. After losing her mother, she could no longer understand the world she was living in. This disconnection from the present manifests itself as a constant search for an idealized past that never really existed. Because of that, she is still searching for connection, even if she can only come through role-playing with her patients. She clearly became a therapist, at least in part, to repair her turbulent past. Once Clark and Mary find each other in the Backrooms, this is how he explains to her what the Backrooms are.
It's every place that ever was.
But how can this be? Even if there is a Backrooms version of every place in the world, why do we only see places connected to the movie's characters?
This place builds them, or actually more like it remembers them.
Again, how does this work? What do the Backrooms choose to remember? There are theories that the Backrooms are the dream of an ancient cosmic being that is trying to figure out humanity. Or that they are the product of an AI that poorly overlays attempts to reproduce human environments, because we cannot understand the purpose of any of them. These are interesting possibilities, but the memories the Backrooms are actually remembering and materializing are ours. Yeah, ours. Because we watched the movie, we watched these characters and the places they passed through. And not only that, we've seen Backrooms videos before. So, the Backrooms scenarios we're exposed to in the movie are our distorted memories related to the Backrooms and to the movie's characters. This movie does not differentiate between the reality we as viewers are exposed to and the reality experienced by the Backrooms in the movie. So the Backrooms, if you treat it as an entity, is watching the same movie as we are, for the most part, which is a perfect meta-narrative move. And you could even come to the conclusion that the movie takes place on an entirely new level of the Backrooms lore, where everything is even more distorted and shuffled. Did Mary visit the Backrooms when she was a child, which would explain why she was so curious to investigate Clark's store? Well, she did go there before, but only in a metaphorical sense. She felt disconnected from her environment, and whether she actually entered a real physical version of the Backrooms doesn't really matter. The first time Clark describes the Backrooms to her, she feels a sense of familiarity, because emotionally at least, she had already been in a place like that.
Imagine describing a dog to someone who's never seen one before and then asking them to draw it. They might get some things right, but there's no way they'd get everything right.
Let's go back to the dinner table scene. As I said, Clark's entire arc comes to an interesting conclusion here. Clark ends up finding a place where he can use other people without repercussions, because that's who he has always been. The Backrooms are simply a convenient place where this side of him can be revealed. His Backrooms version came into existence because he felt deeply unsuccessful and disconnected from his work. It is fair to say that his deepest desire was not simply to become a famous architect, it was to own things, and ultimately to be able to treat people as things.
Like furniture.
Dr. Mary, on the other hand, is forced to let go of her nostalgic idealizations, whether she is arrested in the Backrooms or killed there. Even though Mary says out loud that it's okay for Clark to stay in this place, the primitive version of him fears that the mere act of self-awareness might be enough for Clark to begin breaking the cycle of humanity thoughts that keeps him in this comfortable depressive stage. The version of him attached to his depression, the whining version of him, felt threatened by both Clark himself and the Doctor. But there are still other mysteries in the movie to be solved. Why does an MRA company suddenly becomes a Backrooms exploration company? And why is there a portal to the Backrooms in Clark's furniture store? Maybe there is an explanation for that in Kenny Percival, but my personal explanation is that all these weird things happen precisely because they don't make sense. They are simply the result of an impersonal bureaucratic decision that has nothing to do with any of us. It's that sense of alienation that creates the Backrooms in the first place. Ironically, a company trying to understand what the Backrooms are fails to realize that it is once again helping create more versions of them.